Hi everyone, welcome to The Grind. Today we are joined by a very new addition to The Grind, Steph. Dang. Exciting to have here. Going to be great conversations. Yes, a round of applause for her. She'll be joining us at The Grind. So, message. We're on second week of the series Sent. And we are focusing on 5 big words, basically on which are listed in the vow, listed in Hosea, chapter 2, verses 19 to 20. All right, so chapter 2, verses 19-20, it says, I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. And, oh, wait, nope, I skipped 19. And I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord.
Wow.
So this is God's vow.
So nice.
I know, very beautiful. So what do you think when you hear that word, the vow?
Like I was saying earlier, all I remember is Rachel McAdams and Channing Tatum.
Yep. It's,
understandable.
Don't know if it's a great movie, but it's a very heartfelt movie.
Well, to be fair, the title says The Vow.
The vow.
Yeah. How about you, Steph?
I told them this before we hit record, so now they're holding me to it. When I was reading this and I read out the vow, I thought about the Philippines.
Davao.
Davao.
Never been, but I heard it was very pretty.
It's very nice. I haven't been there.
It's on the south, right? Of the Philippines?
No, it should be on the north. Yeah.
Oh, according to our resident Filipino, June Bellanon, it's on the south.
That's what I said. South.
You said the
It depends on which perspective. If I'm looking
If you look
upside
at it
down.
upside down.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, cool. Wonderful.
Thank you, June.
Now I know forever that
I
the vow
win.
is on the south.
Congratulations.
Thanks to the Chinese at this show, not the Filipino.
Not the Filipino.
All right,
I
but
trusted the wrong person.
in all seriousness, vows. Let's talk about that for a little bit. It's not just a city in the Philippines or a movie
Rachel
that we watch.
McAdams.
Yeah, Rachel McAdams. But for you, like, what's the gravity in this word for you?
Oh, it's very heavy. I mean, like, the first thing I would think about when you talk about vows are sort of a covenant in a way. Like you really take what you're saying or what you are promised. I don't know if I should say promise, but something that you are declaring. Especially, like, for example, in a marriage, you have vows, right?
Yeah.
So when you're saying that is something that you will take heart and you will take it seriously, and it's sort of a covenant thing where you cannot separate from. So, like for me, for my wife, I made a covenant that I will I'll be with her for the rest of my life. That's what I'm gonna do. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, when I think about the severity of the word vow, I actually think about inner vows. Something that we talk about in church once in a while, and it comes usually under the topic of heart healing. When people have inner vows and people have like bitter root judgments, those usually get lumped into the same thing. And the severity of an inner vow is sometimes you might not even remember or not even know that you made this vow, but it actually shapes a lot of your decisions, how you think about things, just because these vows were set in place kind of like a cornerstone, like a wall. So of course if a vow is good, if a vow is from Jesus, it's good. If a vow is from us, maybe it might not be.
it might fluctuate for all we know.
When we think about the severity of what a vow can be, I think about that, which means the opposite of it can only be so good.
I actually have a question for you guys. Do you think these sort of vows also shape the way you live your life?
I would think so as well.
You know, like for example, like when you were talking about the inner vows as well. I mean, in a way, because it's within your own, like within yourself. It sort of translates on how you live your life as well. Even for marriage, because you made a vow, you live as someone who's married, right? So
you're not like going out and just doing whatever you want. You're a married person right now. And I think when I think about vows, I automatically think about marriage, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's more than a pinky promise where you're like, oh, we pray the promise not to do this. I mean, it's a solemn promise. Solemn promise, not Solomon promise. A solemn promise.
A wise promise.
A wise promise, that's right.
Yeah, very wise.
I don't know, because I feel like I will not necessarily say I vow to you this from this day forward that I will not do this. I mean, it feels like
She sounds like the queen from the north.
like,
Where the vow is.
the queen of the vow. Anyways, we digress. But there is severe significances wherein I definitely see myself live according to maybe certain promises I make to myself or certain thoughts I have in my mind, like, oh, because this happened to me, I promise I will never do this again.
Yeah.
So it's, even though it's not necessarily I vow to never do this again, it's just a mental note, like, this ain't gonna happen to me.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna do this.
Yeah.
Therefore, to protect myself. From
And it could protect you, but it also very much in the same way can hinder you.
Yeah.
Depending on what the vow is.
Yeah. Like people who have this sort of bitterness to certain people, and then like, you know what, I'll promise I'll never speak to that person again.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's a vow.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then like 20 years later, you think you still have bad blood, but maybe like it's just all under the bridge by now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the kind of person's like, huh? What happened?
Yeah, but your heart's held on to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes when people ask me like about like say beef that happened between me and a certain person, I'm like, actually don't remember. But then, you know, so like we talked about vows being like restrictions and like I won't do this. You know, sometimes people when they see God's vow, they're like, oh, I have to operate within this boundaries. Like, is it restrictions or is it freedom? And really, honestly, for God, when He made a vow, it's really creates a boundary for us to operate and to flourish. I think when He says this, He really desires us to grow. And so if we look at the words being chosen, these are big words, right? Like righteousness, righteousness, justice, steadfast love, mercy. These are just, and faithfulness, these are just big words, and we know that these are just boundaries that the Lord just provides for us to operate within that. But we don't have time to talk about all of it, so I want to talk about a few. So we're going to focus on three important ones. So clearly Patrina can speak today. So let's talk about righteousness. All right, so what's the first thought when you hear the word righteousness?
Jesus.
What a model answer.
Wow.
Oh, from
Very
only
nice.
basically, I do not expect anything less from someone who grew up at church.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I disagree.
Yeah.
Definitely,
Try.
because I mean, like, one thing that we need to be careful of now is just that everyone has their own perspective of righteousness.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays, and it's so difficult. And I'm not saying that everyone gets to experience the same way, but even for parents, like how righteousness is being practiced in the way of the world it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And like what you said, I like what you mentioned about boundaries and freedom. Sometimes it sounds very opposite of each other, but in the way God did it, it's complementing. Because you can imagine, like, for these certain things, it's not that you're being imprisoned to be doing these certain things, but these are sort of like ways for you to remind that remind the promises of God. And if you're within that boundaries, you know you're in good hands.
Yeah.
So that's why I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, righteousness has everything to do with the heart.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to do with like physical boundaries or whatever. It's like, if your heart is changed, then however you act, however you think, it's an overflow from your heart change, right? So if we don't understand what Jesus' righteousness actually means, then of course we will feel like we are operating in a cage.
Yeah.
Of course we will fly to, so I'm not allowed to swear.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed
to do this.
Yeah, I'm not allowed sex before marriage. I'm not allowed like all of these things. But in righteousness, when our heart wants to be like wants to follow after Jesus's heart, wants to follow after Jesus's intention, then the consequence of all of those might be purity.
Yeah.
Might be not swearing when you're angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
If we look at God's vow of righteousness, he says that he will act consistently according to his nature. I mean, so we can always expect that he will act out of who he is.
Yeah.
And the righteousness that we receive from God, I think oftentimes when people think about righteousness, like, oh, I got to do this, and this to gain righteousness. But with God's like, well, we did it. We have done it through the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
Like, we have righteousness because of the sacrifice that Jesus has made on the cross. And so I think, we want to move from looking at it as works-based versus grace-based.
Yeah.
Right. So it is literally the grace of God.
Amen.
And I think having that encounter with God's righteousness, bearing the righteousness of God, we want to bring that to where we go, right? Especially when we go, like, this whole series is on missions, right? Like, we don't want to be going somewhere and be like, hey, we are here to save you.
Yeah.
But literally we want to portray the message that we are here to show you that God saves, and to be an extension of his righteousness, on our trips.
Amen.
And I think wherever you go, there's always going to be different cultures, right?
Yeah.
That we're going to face, and their definition of what is right and what is wrong could be really different.
Yeah.
Right. In one situation, it could be wrong to have multiple wives,
Yeah.
but then in one other culture, actually, it's the norm.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, like, how do we navigate this situation where culture does have an impact on righteousness?
Oh, wow.
Well, a very logistical tip before y'all go on your missions trips is to research their culture
That's
before
very
you
good.
go.
Yeah.
Because their culture is not your culture, and you can't judge someone based on your own culture.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah, that is actually a very good tip. Read about the country before you go missions. And I think that's something that we do as well, like in our training. It's like, I mean, I could be going to Malaysia, and yes, even though I'm Malaysian, but it's still actually a lot about my country that I still need to understand.
Yeah.
Like demographic and also the location.
Talk about someone, not saying who, needs to understand how the Philippines is like. Yes, I would have devoured. He goes up to the. But yeah, so I'm just saying, the history, and the things that's going on.
Yeah, tribal groups.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So,
and I think also, like what you're saying also in terms of, like, sometimes there are certain cultures where it might not be, I don't know, I don't want to be too Christian-y about it, but it's like, it's not within the boundary of the Bible. Let's just say like that. I don't know how to say it, but at the same time, you still need to respect that their culture.
Yeah.
And I think through that, even though, yes, let's say your beliefs are two different things, you can still sort of respect that, but at the same time, you can still be in line with what you believe in.
Yeah.
Without disrespecting that other person.
Yeah.
So when you go to a mission trip, I think it's also very important that you remind yourself that you're not there to, like, condemn the person, but instead you're supposed to love the person.
I'm saving you! I'm saving you! Let me save you! Thank you.
yeah.
And through this, I think it will help you understand or navigate your way of, okay, so how do I serve these people? How do I be able to really reach out to them?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's true.
because that's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
We want to be extension of God's righteousness,
Yeah.
God's goodness in the places that we go to.
Yeah.
Not there to condemn. I like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about justice for just a bit, right? If you look at God, he deals with us with integrity and fairness, and his desires to seek the best for us wherever possible. And I know a hot term these days is social justice, right? I think everyone's like standing up for something, justice for this, justice for that, justice for everything. It's a lot, but I think if we were to look at it, how do we ensure justice in an imperfect world that is governed by faulty people?
Oh my goodness.
The big question.
Sounds like we're gonna be doing we're what do you call this? Competing for Miss Universe, world peace.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
I'm Miss Hong Kong, and I believe in world peace.
Oh, justice.
I mean, let's be real. We're not exactly in positions where we're like making policies or anything like that.
Like make a change, basically, something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the most we can do is like a Facebook petition. But let's be real. Who uses Facebook now?
Wow.
Social justice in an
Imperfect.
unjust world.
Yeah, in an imperfect world that is governed by faulty people.
I think that is the first thing we need to understand, is that leaders, whether Jesus has himself come to you in person and told you this person should be in whatever governing power, it means to me it means it means that they are there for a purpose that only God understands.
Yes.
Or like
Okay.
only God sees the perpetuating effects of.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that they themselves are Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it doesn't mean that they are perfect according to the Bible and definitely not perfect according to our standards.
Yeah.
So I like try to drill that thought into my brain every time I really want to judge someone in a
Oh,
governing
dear.
power, or
Yeah.
even like roll my eyes at some company doing something or not doing something.
Yeah.
I have to remember, like, I see it from one standpoint, Jesus sees it from another, and his hand is over it more than my hand can be. Like, I can only do so much from my couch.
Yeah.
One scroll and one click at a time.
There
Keyboard warriors. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. I think also for me, when it comes to social justice and stuff like that, because I'm trying to be very careful as well, because there are so many things that, like what you said, when you talk about social justice, there are a lot of different things where people are fighting for, and as much as I can, I really try to look at it in the perspective. Okay, I understand that this particular situation is very heavy, but look at it in a bigger scale of, okay, this is just one part of that particular situation. So what does God see in this situation, and how does this particular one affect the rest of the other people being all involved with that? And it's a very hard decision, because if that particular thing is already, you can already see or know what is the situation, you can already pretty much answer any particular what I call this, like, problem in these sort of situations. But then there's no answer. It's because it always bleeds to other areas where you need to really take into consideration, and I think this is what God sees, and we just don't have the answers. So
Yeah.
Okay, so living in Hong Kong, we get faced with different situations by, justice for this and justice for that. But especially when we go overseas, then we get faced with different situations, because we get exposed to, again, different cultures and the different problems that they face. Have you been on trips overseas, like mission trips overseas, and saw something that happened, you're like, man, there needs to be justice for this?
I mean, even if I haven't traveled other places, I can see certain things here in Hong Kong as well. I mean, I want to, because the only place in terms of mission trip I've been to is Taiwan, and in staying that amount of time, I don't see the big scale of it. So there are some stuff that I see there that also relates to what's happening here in Hong Kong. Like, for example, I remember when, I don't know if I should say this, is it okay? The discrimination with the workers in the factories in Taiwan. So I mean, like, of course I never know every single person's situation, but then you have that sort of like, we need to do something, like, but then what? Like,
then what, right?
and one thing I'm so grateful for that situation was, as much as I wanted to do something, I felt like I'm the one who's being encouraged by these people, because we had an instance where a lot of these factory workers, they only have one day, sort of, no, not really one day, but more of like a particular break on a Sunday, and then they would just go out and go to church, and that's that's supposed to be their dinner, and then they will go back and then back to work.
Working.
So I mean, I don't know their situation. I believe that they're in good hands, but in the global scale, in that bigger scale of that particular issue, you feel like, oh, there's something we need to do, like that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so hard because you see something, and then we have hearts, right? We see these situations. We see other situations where it kind of is like thrown into these people not having what we feel are basic human rights, right? And then it's like, what can we do? How is it so unfair? How can some people be making decisions that cascade down into all of this happening? So in those moments, it's so hard to remember that like God does have an overarching promise and hope, because it doesn't seem like it translates. And that's like an age-old question that always gets asked. Right? If God is good, why do people suffer?
When you go on missions, like I mentioned earlier, there's that whole tendency of like savior complex. I'm here to save. I'm here to do something. Like what I do is going to like change the world. But what really is going to change the community is the people who are living there, who are working with the people. And I know when I went to Cambodia, and they're telling us stories of how tourists, male tourists from Australia or wherever it is, they will go to the specific village so that they can find kids and
adopt.
No,
nope.
not adopt.
Oh,
you are too wholesome.
You're too wholesome.
Think less.
Think
much less wholesome.
Okay, then I know where it is going.
Yes.
The exact opposite, basically.
Yeah, the exact opposite. And it's just like you hear about it and you're like, that's not right. Where's the justice for these children? And you go there and the feelings just rise up. Like you want these kids to be protected. They should not have to be subject to these men coming over so that they can be their subject of fantasy. That's disgusting. And yet, that's like where's the justice? But I've also found myself like once I leave the situation, I forget about it. And I think sometimes there's that struggle of like, I feel this one justice, and then when you get out of it, like you forget about it. And then there's this sort of like a guilt trip sometimes I put myself on. It's like, did you really care about it, or you just it's just the feels?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes with compassion, what it drives us to act, but then also sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we are numbed. So how does our culture numb us to compassion?
I think one thing is because of social media as well. You get to see a lot of things over and over again, and you get desensitized with difficult situations that other places are experiencing. And through this is what I think also, because through mission trips you end up going to that field and you become part of that. I mean, not in a big scale, but you start to actually tangibly experience or even hear from the personal the relationships that you're starting to build within that period of time with these people. Because for this message, we're talking about being sent, and I think it's as believers and who want to make a change, I think the first thing that we need to do is to recognize that there is a problem, there is an issue that is happening, and yes, we will at some point be desensitized, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't be
not doing something.
Yeah, we shouldn't do something. So
for me, the first thing that comes to mind is our culture living in Hong Kong. We're very fast-paced. We are also very, what is the word? It's like you question things in like a negative manner.
How can that person be so good to do this?
Yes. What I am more thinking of is like I've heard people say when you walk past someone on the street asking for money, don't give it to them because
they're part of the triad.
Yeah, like they're probably this or probably that, or it's a scam. And then those thoughts last longer, then what if it's not?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you just trust the $50 that you're giving to that person, because it's just $50 anyway. But when I think of how I'm sometimes numb to compassion, that is the first thing that comes to mind.
No, that's true. Yeah.
What is happening?
Jinx, you owe each other a Coke?
We've been working together for far too long on this talk. Now that you mentioned that, because I was thinking as well, again, in the context of Hong Kong too, sometimes you see people on streets that sell those stuffed toys and they are dumb. Mute. Same word. The same word.
Should we be saying that word though?
That's the correct term, right? Mute.
Dumb. No. Is it dumb?
I think
it's fine, right? Okay.
Right.
Politically, it should be the deaf and dumb.
Anyways,
yeah.
So they're selling stuffed toys, and so obviously I'm not interested. They drop one, and out of the kindness of my heart, I'm like, oh, let me help you, let me pick it up for you and pass it to you. But that was your way of getting you to buy it. So
that is a scam. That is
then they
That's smart.
Then they didn't want to take it back from you, and I was like, no, I don't want it. And they kept showing me the sign and like explain where they were. I was like, no, I really am not interested. I don't want a Hello Kitty.
You touch it, you buy it.
And then they kept won't pick it back. So what did I do? I mean, I don't want it. I really don't want it. So I placed it on the floor and I left. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So then now that when I see things like this on streets, I tend to like avoid, so that I don't find myself in the same situation again. But yeah, I know like there have been times where I've watched or know of like issues and situations, and it just drives me to act. And then sometimes, for example, like say human trafficking, we all know that like that's something that I feel strongly about. Especially after watching Nefarious. And then at that moment, like, what can I do? And the only thing I can do is give money. But I'm like, is that it?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, even though maybe you might feel like, is that it? You never know that little bit can still contribute to something.
Yeah.
And I think I watched Nefarious like 10 years ago or however many years ago when it first came to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And I stayed in touch with what they're doing, and I think seeing what breakthrough that they're having, even with like Pornhub and like how and all that stuff that's going down with it. I think even though it's been 10 years, it's still amazing to see like things can still happen. So I think even though we find ourselves in situations like, where is the justice? We can let me just notice, as I just said earlier, that really God, he deals with us with integrity and fairness, and even beyond that. And at the end of the day, his desire is to seek the best for us wherever possible. So yes, it may not make sense now, but we have to trust in God's goodness. All right, let's take a moment to talk about one more point: unfailing love. We know that it's not this romantic love. But it is much stronger than that.
Yeah.
And I think with God's love, we can trust that no matter what happens, he will stay with us. He's not going to dump us. He's going to stay with us. And I think if we look at it on the mission context, right? So we go on missions. Why do we go on missions? We're driven by compassion. We want to be part of what God is doing. But what is the motivation sometimes behind going on missions? Are we really there to show God's unfailing love?
Wow.
Right? So I know this is like mission versus tourism. Like,
Yeah.
Are you there to just snap a picture with a Vietnamese kid and get 100 likes on Instagram?
Woo, look at me doing good for the world.
Painting walls.
Have you guys ever found yourself in that trap though?
Yes. 100%.
Honestly, I'm not sure, because I've only been to a mission trip once, and I like to say I didn't think of it that way at the moment, because I've never experienced what a mission trip is apart from that.
Right.
So I mean, of course, you cannot not think about the fact that you're on a different place, and in a way, tourism will be in your mind.
Yeah.
Oh, can we go see this? Can we go see that?
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. For me, mission tourism, knowing what mission tourism is, I needed to be educated first before I understood, which is why I say I definitely fell into the trap of what it was, because when I was younger, I didn't understand. You know, when I was younger, I would go on missions trips, and then I would go paint some walls, and the photos that I end up, if I posted any, would be of me with paint all over my body, instead of me having been educated on why did I need to paint this wall in the first place. Is there any way that I can continue helping this school/church? Or even just understanding that big groups of people perhaps going to an orphanage, staying there for 3 days, and then leaving the kids forever and not adopting a single one because we were kids ourselves, actually might be pretty traumatic for the children. But when you're young, you don't think about that. You just think, oh, I made them happy today.
Woo! We played games. That was fun.
So it definitely needed to come with educating myself. Now that I'm older, I hope that I am a little bit better. At least it's top of mind when I go.
Because even like, again, going to Cambodia and going to the girls' home, right? They don't allow anyone to go to the girls' home because these children or these girls, they've been in situations where they've been exploited. And so if you were to go into their homes, you're going to be basically creating a relationship with these girls. And it's gonna be long term because they're used to like people coming in and like coming out their lives. So they're very particular about people who go in. And so I think that's good on the missionaries to think about that
to
as
protect
well.
them as well.
Because there'll be some also people who are like, oh, we want to get as many exposure as possible so we can get funding and everything. So we get all these different groups. And
but it can also endanger the person.
Exactly. So I think oftentimes when we go on missions, we have to really think about, is this what we think is actually loving? Because it could actually be going against everything that the missionaries have spent all their time setting up. And then you just come in with one thing and that's it.
You blow it up.
And I've definitely been guilty of thinking mission trip is like also like, oh, another place to check out a country. And I think about like, oh, on a day off we can go like here and here. And but at the end of the day, it's like, pet, that's not the goal. It's not another Instagram moment on your page. It's really, the focus is on what is God doing here and how can I partner with him? How can I show his unfailing love? And speaking of unfailing love, like what are some acts of unfailing love that you have seen? That is, besides obviously the sacrifice of Jesus, what are some unfailing acts of love that has really impacted you?
Are we thinking on a missions field?
Let's go with missions field.
Our entire life is a missions field, guys.
But we're specifically thinking about like being out there.
I recently went on a trip to Uganda. One of the things that we did in Uganda is we were invited to run a ministry school. And then that school, we were doing topics like forgiveness, deliverance, that kind of teaching of like healing hearts, whatnot. I will never forget the image of seeing these Ugandan pastors and ministry leaders understanding God's forgiveness. And I say that because when I went to Uganda, I didn't expect there to be so many testimonies from these people, but after the deliverance, after the forgiveness sessions, they came up and a lot of them had very similar stories to each other, in which their childhood was filled with literal like physical torture from their parents. Like part of African parenting in that culture, in that generation, just seemed to be straight physical torture.
Yikes.
Like we heard stories of this man whose dad was a construction worker, and to punish his kids, he would pour hot concrete onto their feet to stick them to the ground, and then have them outside in the storm.
Oh my days.
You know, like that level. And then so to hear those stories, and then to hear these people come up and say, and say, after having learned about what true forgiveness looks like, after having learned about what true deliverance looks like I forgive my father. I bless my father, which is even harder than forgiving them, because you can forgive and forget, but if you bless someone, you are really just cutting off the you know, like the
hatred,
the
whatever
hatred.
it is.
There we go.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you. Hearing them say, I forgive those that have physically tortured me. I bless them in the same way that God blesses me. That to me is unfailing love. To know that love can extend that deep and heal wounds that are very physically still there.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't do anything to help them. It was all God. But having the privilege to see that in person and to hear those stories in person, like, I will not forget it.
It's actually pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to top that.
No, don't top it. God is the same.
Yeah, that one
It's
is
my
that was.
family.
But honestly, one thing that I would want to give credit to are mana. I mean, like, it's still a mission field, right? And sometimes when Pastor Betty talks about these the people that they reach out to, and like for Emily, they would, because I see what they do when they have these services, like on Wednesdays and Saturdays for the elderly, but then when they go to the houses and how they actually reach out to them, and they would actually have like these genuine conversations, and you see how happy these people are just visiting them visiting the like, for example, the elderlies and stuff, and how they are really blessed of what Mana is doing. It really touches my heart, because this is how you see when people who they don't necessarily know who these people are, but intentionally go for them and just reach out to them and explain to them how much God loves them. It's just overwhelming. So
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, there's some people who, you know, who say one thing and they don't act the things that you talk about, and you know, sometimes, you know, you wonder, like, is that speaker for real, like world-class speakers, right? But I would say Heidi Baker is one person who really lives up to what she preaches. You know, she's all about stopping for the one. And I think when we went to Mozambique and, you know, was there her ministry, and seeing her how she lived in the tent, served the people, really stopped for each one, and hugging the kids in the villages, and people like were Mama Heidi, and really you can see that her heart was really just to love the people. She wasn't there for, like, you know, image or again, like, hey, look at me, I'm so good. She really was there just to serve. Like, she's a person who understood the language and speaks the language to the people as well. I mean, even when she was living in Hong Kong, she was learning Cantonese as well, and she's able to speak it too. So I think woman is really, her heart is really to serve the people. So again, if we go back to God's vow, right, and all these things, and I know those are big words, like, can we really extend unfailing love to people? Can we really extend righteousness, justice? Because again, we're fallen, we can make mistakes, but at the end of the day, what we can do is just to do our best and show up wherever we're at, and, you know, just trust that God has placed us for where we are for, and we were to quote Esther, for such a time as this. But really, it's show up and and just do your best.
Be the best that we can be in God, so we can show God as much as we can.
So God's vow can be our vow. So that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for a deep and really meaningful conversation. I think it was really good. And so we'll see you at our next grind. It's gonna be great. Bye.